Hello, I'm Stuart Goche, County Agent with the LSU Ag Center, and welcome to Get It Growing with the Lafayette Master Gardeners. Today's show, we have a very timely topic. We're going to be talking about irrigation. As you know, it's been very dry in South Louisiana this summer. Some areas are seeing rainfall totals about half of what we normally see for this time of year. I was listening to Weather Channel the other day, and in some areas, and I know at my house, I'm probably 13, 14 inches below normal rainfall. And that has made our lawns very dry and our flower beds very dry. So with that in mind, we thought that we would dedicate today's show to talking a little bit about irrigation. We brought in a couple of our experts. We're very fortunate with our Master Gardener group to have Master Gardeners who have kind of specialized in some different areas. And we have our club president, Mr. Mark Wiley, who he's kind of our irrigation guru for our group, and he actually put in our irrigation system that we have out there at our Nelson Horticulture Center in our lovely demo beds. He put in that system last year, and it's worked real nicely for us. And at his home, he's also put in a good deal of irrigation in his pots and his flower beds. We also have Ms. Janae Foley, who's in charge of our plant propagation, or works with plant propagation and takes care of our nursery beds. And I know she's been doing a lot of watering around her house and also in our demo beds this summer. So with that, let's talk a little bit about some different things we might want to keep in mind with irrigation that y'all are seeing.
Well, one thing we want to mention, we're going to talk here about a little bit more high-tech irrigation. Mark has gotten all of the Master Gardeners very interested in installing watering systems because they're quick, they're efficient, and they're relatively inexpensive for the labor that they save you in your garden. But we do also want to talk just about some general principles about watering for people that don't have an irrigation system, and maybe some little low-tech tips too. One thing we need to keep in mind is that when we go into periods of drought like this, people start sort of overreacting. For one thing, people start thinking, oh, I'm going to grow cactus, I'm just going to grow aloe veras. Well, we have to remember that we live in Southwest Louisiana. And yes, we're going to have times of drought and times like this week that we get more than ample rainfall. So if you start shifting toward a drought mentality, you're going to get caught because we don't live in an arid area most of the time. So give us some ideas, Stuart, about how to keep your lawn alive through a drought without overdoing it.
What we see at the county agent's office, our calls start changing. When we start getting into dry weather, we start getting a lot of calls with people having problems with their lawns. And very often the underlying cause is that simply the lawn may have stayed too dry too long. Mm-hmm. We have some lawns, if you have centipede grass, for example. Centipede grass is a very low maintenance type grass, but it doesn't tolerate drought well at all. And if you have a centipede lawn and we go 3-4 weeks without a significant amount of rainfall, that lawn will usually get crunchy quite quickly, and it'll start to die back in areas. Very often people will go out there and they'll water it a little bit, and they expect miracles to occur from just putting out a little bit of water just one time. If these lawns, the centipede lawn, gets really dry and you're not able to soak your lawn really well once a week, it's sometimes difficult for that lawn to kind of come back. Other lawns like St. Augustine can take a little more drought. Bermuda grass can take a good bit of drought. But sometimes when we go through those dry periods, we start having some pest problems. We're seeing a lot of chinch bugs in St. Augustine. Chinch bugs like hot, dry weather. If you start noticing some brown patches appear in your St. Augustine, we want to worry about chinch bugs. And there's some good granular type insecticides that you can put out for that little insect that sucks juice from the grass and kind of causes almost a scorched appearance, like your grass will die in spots. We have a lot of grub problems when it's dry. Actually, wet weather causes the grubs that live in the soil sometimes, keeps their populations down. When we have a lot of rain, they get more fungal disease. We don't have as many grubs. So that's another thing that we'll see will kill your lawn in spots during dry weather. One thing you want to look at with your lawn, if you find that your lawn is you're not sure whether you should water it or not, one thing is to go out there and to maybe walk across it. And if your footprints, if you can tell kind of where you've walked, where your grass is kind of wilting a little bit, it's probably time to water. What you don't want to do is water it every day. and you don't want to keep your ground too wet all the time, because you encourage your grass, you spoil it, and you encourage it to develop a real shallow root system, and then it's not going to be able to tolerate any drought when you do that. You also don't want to cut your grass too short during dry weather. Short grass, the length of the blades is directly proportional to the length of the roots. So if you have short grass, you have short roots, you're going to have a lawn that is more drought sensitive. So let it get taller in dry weather. Don't mow it as often. Water it maybe once a week with about an inch of rain, or an inch of water from a sprinkler. If you're not sure how much water you're putting out, get you some cheap little rain gauges, set them out in your yard, and make sure that you're putting about a half inch to an inch of water out on your lawn. And you want to do that, sometimes you want to pulse it, do it in stages. If you sometimes put out an inch all at once, you end up flooding the street out front. It takes a while for that ground to get saturated again. The ground almost becomes kind of hydrophobic. It kind of sheds water off if it gets really dry. So it's better to do like little short cycles, maybe 10, 15-minute cycles, 3-4 times in that day, once a week. Get it really good, deep soaking, and that's usually sufficient for our climate here if you put about an inch a week.
Okay, so Stuart summarized how to take care of your yard. First of all, if you see little patches that look scorched, don't necessarily panic. That's probably cinch bugs. Get an inch of water a week on your yard in slow increments so that you don't get runoff, and mow the yard high. You know, it's a little bit more work. You're going to have to mow more frequently, but that's just what's good for the health of your plant. Now, we also want to talk a little bit about plants that are in the ground, our landscape plants, our shrubs, and our ornamentals. Mark installed at our demo gardens last year a low-tech system. We have it on a timer, but what it uses is just the old soaker hose that you can buy generally all over. Now, this is what I'm using at home because I have 2 acres. So I have not quite gotten into the try and get all the beds under an irrigation system yet. But I am planting new things. And the first 2 summers for newly planted things are critical. So I am trying to keep water on those things at least an inch a week, and I'm doing that with the soaker hose. At the end of the 2 years, I'm probably going to just throw the soaker hoses away because they're inexpensive and they tend to develop leaks. If you're choosing to use soaker hoses and you get a leak, duct tape is the way to to go. You know, you duct tape it about 6 inches and it's going to take care of those leaks. You can also use it to crimp the end. I did that in the demo garden yesterday, to crimp the end of your hose if you're not using the little crimp system. Duct tape works just great for that too. So if you want to go low cost, quick and easy, it's soaker hoses and duct tape. As we've said though, Mark has come up with an ingenious system that is inexpensive and very easy to install, and he has gotten many of the master gardeners very enthused about installing a watering system. Mark lives in a townhouse. Just to let you know what his situation is to sort of apply it to yours, the type of system that he's installed could be easily used if you have a lot of plants around your patio or you want to do the front of your bed. So Mark, start telling us something about this wonderful system.
Right. Thank you, Janae, very much, and thank you for inviting me to come. Basically, I have 2 systems. I have one for my plants in the beds and one for the pots. I probably have 60 pots in my front yard area or my front patio area. And of course, it was very difficult to continue to water them every day. I found, as you know, with pots, they run out of water quickly. So you need a system that kind of helped myself from being out there for all hours in the evening to water them, and it's when they got dry. I purchased this locally. You can get it at one of the large home-type stores for home maintenance and gardening materials. You can buy this equipment. This is the main hose. It's a half-inch hose. It's thin plastic. You attach, very simply, a connector on the end here that hooks to your hose bib, your water outlet faucet, and then you come through with a little tool they provide and you can poke a hole in it. With this hole, You run this through your bed, and as you poke your hole where you need your stakes, and you stick your stake into the ground and poke it into this piece. And it takes a little bit of effort, but it's not difficult.
But it's something women can do, and I think
That's all
that's
it
one
was.
reason many of the master gardeners are enthused is, our husbands are very generous with their time, but a lot of times we're a little impatient, and many of the women are just going to town with this system because it is something that a woman can easily do.
Correct. Anyone can easily put this in. So you stick these in every 3 or 4 foot in your beds and around where your plants need to be watered. If it's in the center of the bed and you may have a 4-foot diameter around it, you pick a sprayer that goes on top and it'll put out a mist in a circle. Or if you just want something that is 180 degrees or maybe a long narrow spray, you just pick the different spots, different connectors in your spots.
And notice just how easily all of these are different little emitters that will spray water in different patterns and in different widths. I mean,
Correct.
I would suggest at all of the home and garden centers, they have systems with little booklets. One thing you need to do is go pick up a little booklet and start studying what your particular layout is and what you want to do with a watering system.
That's correct. And a 1/2-inch system comes with all kinds of parts and pieces. If you come up to a corner and you need to run around the corner, you just put the little 90-degree elbow on and continue your pipe around the corner.
Okay, what happens if you make a mistake?
Make a mistake. That's something that we all do.
Right.
All right. And let's say I poked a hole too close and I didn't have enough hose to make it to the spot. They have your little mistake corrector, which is just a little plug that plugs right in like so, and you've corrected your mistake.
Little goof plug. Okay.
A little goof plug.
And I'm sure they come so many in a pack. They, plan for it, you make a few mistakes there.
That's correct. I also have a separate system that I've run for all my pots, and the reason I've done it this way is that I find that the watering for my beds, the larger system that sprays a bigger diameter, up to 4 foot in diameter, I only need to do it about once a week for an hour. I let it run for an hour, and that gives me about 1 inch of water. And because I use a good ground cover, a good mulch, pine straw, it keeps the system, keeps the grounds and the beds well maintained and at a good moisture level that once a week is just fine. Now in my pots, because of the sun and because the pots dry out quickly, I have found now during this hot weather that I need to water my pots about every 15 minutes every other day. A month or two ago it was every 3 days. Right now, they're requiring much more water. Well, I basically have another system just like this with the 1/2-inch black hose running all around through up against my walls of my house. And in each pot, then I put one of these items. This little sprayer sticks into the pot, and you can twist the top here and adjust the amount of water that you need for each pot. From this item, you have a little connector that goes in one end of the 1/4-inch hose, and the other end hooks on to the sprayer. And with the same tool, you pop a hole into the 1/2-inch black tubing and just stick this in. That's all it takes.
Now tell us a little bit about the maintenance on a system like this.
Well, I think when you first put in your black hose, what you want to do is once you get the hose run throughout your beds as you want it, you flush it with water to get any of the dirt that may have gotten into the system when you were running it around on the ground and all your pieces. You get that flushed out, plug up the end, and then just start popping your units in as you want them. Just being careful that you don't get dirt down into the hole. I always kind of pick it up off the ground, as you saw, just pick up off the ground and punch the unit and just try to keep the dirt out as far as possible. If you do get dirt in the system, This particular one has a little filter on it, and it will stop spraying, and you just come and pull it apart and blow the dirt out of it and hook it back together, and it will start spraying again. Again, on this unit, it has an adjustment that you can adjust the amount of water that comes in and out.
Now, how do you fertilize your beds with a system like this?
Being a master gardener, I love to fertilize every plant that needs to be fertilized. So I particularly like to just put my fertilizer into a pot or into some sort of a can, a watering can, and go around individually fertilize my plants. However, you can buy an adapter that will fit on here and put tablet fertilizer or liquid fertilizer in it and let it fertilize your plants. I particularly like to go around to each one as they need to be fertilized.
So you use a soluble fertilizer.
That's right.
Do you use in your beds a slow release fertilizer too?
Yes, I do. I like to use the slow release fertilizer, the granule type that you throw out into the beds, and that lasts about 90 days, the type I have. But then I'll go back and on like my roses or something, I'll go use a soluble fertilizer every 2 weeks.
To give them a little extra oomph.
That's correct. That's correct.
And tell us, give us some idea of the cost. Say if you wanted to just generally, and I mean it's going to be general, but if you wanted to do a little patio system.
I think that you can probably start with what they call a starter kit, and it shouldn't be no more than $30 or $40. And the beauty of this is that you can add on to it. I have some of these lines that run up to 150 foot. I think you can see some of my, on the monitor right now, we're seeing some of the watering systems in the pots. And you just continue to add on and pop on them. I find 150 foot is about the maximum you can have. And then you just put another hose system in.
Right. Now, if you wanted to do, say, fairly cover your front beds of a typical home, what do you think the cost would be, roughly?
Roughly $100, I would say.
So really, say $30 to $40 for a patio, $100 for if you were doing the beds on the front of a typical suburban yard.
Now you can even go either more high tech, and what I have done is I have a little manifold that I have established onto my hose bib, and then I have 2 timers on that manifold. And one timer goes to the beds, the flower beds. The other timer goes to the pots. And that way I can set my time for the pots at once a week for an hour, or for the beds once a week for an hour, and for the pots every other day for 15 minutes. I find in pots 15 minutes is perfect because you want the water to flow through the pot. Adding fertilizers always puts salt in the pot, and the salts will build up and they will eventually kill the roots, and the plants will die. By letting the water run for 15 minutes through the pots, it flushes all those impurities out and keeps my plants very healthy and very nice.
Now, Stuart, Mark, thank you. I think Mark gave us a wonderful overview of establishing a watering system. He was mentioning the timing of watering, and I know Stuart has, expressed some concerns that when people get into watering, they really get into watering, and it's a little feast or famine thing there. So, Stuart, you might want to give us some tips on proper watering.
Right, we kind of get more horror stories when people call the county agent's office. It's generally because they have a problem, but very often it's like anything else. It's like a new toy. You put in one of these irrigation systems. Normally, we've been dry the last couple of years, but during normal rainfall years, in some cases, now Mark is a little different because he's watering some pots, and obviously those have to be watered pretty often, but often in a regular landscape situation, we often go through the year where maybe just 1 week out of the year, those plants would definitely have to be irrigated. Sometimes in a real rainy year, they might never have to be irrigated in a landscape situation. And usually our lawns don't really require much watering here in South Louisiana. This year has been very different, and last year has been different. But we get people put in these systems during a normal rainfall year, and then they leave them on, and regardless of what time of year it is. And when we go from about November to April, most of our lawns here don't need any watering. Our lawns are dormant at that time of year. We usually have adequate soil moisture during the winter months, and if you keep them wet you're going to encourage fungal diseases like brown patch to occur. And what I've seen through working for the Extension Services, usually when we start getting brown patch calls, say like in October, the first few calls we get, I will always ask the people, do you have an irrigation system? And they generally do. And they are watering real frequently going into winter. They're keeping the grass wet, especially if you water it in the late evening. That grass stays wet overnight. The dew is not able to dry. Probably the best time that you'd want to water would maybe be about 5, 6 in the morning before it gets windy. That way the grass would dry real quickly. But if you water the night before and you keep the ground wet and you're watering during the winter months, you really are encouraging disease to occur. And those are some of the problems we see. Also, in your beds, if you put these stakes, these watering stakes, right up on the base of a plant, and some people keep the trunks of the plant really wet and they water and they have a system on. And what we encourage people, if you put a system like an irrigation system for your lawn, you want maybe it hooked up to a rain gauge where it automatically sees how much water we're getting. If we're getting rain that week, there are nice little control things that can actually monitor how much rain occurred that week, and if it wasn't sufficient, then the system works. If it was sufficient, then the system doesn't kick on that week. Or just manually, if you get rain like right now this week, you need to turn your system off. Don't just ignore it and add more water, because our soil here has so much clay that when we keep it oversaturated with water, oxygen gets depleted from the soil and plants start dying from root rot. And a few years ago, we were just seeing a tremendous amount of root rot when we went through a rainy period for a few years.
And we need to talk a little bit about mulching, because mulching is so important in Southwest Louisiana. Whether you have an irrigation system or whether you don't have an irrigation system, you need to be applying mulch to your garden. We in the demo garden have been using pine straw. We're very, very pleased with it. Because it's been so dry, I've been mulching up to 6 inches with the pine straw. Typically, I think we go about 4 inches. But regardless, we cannot stress enough the importance of mulching your beds. The mulch keeps, in addition to keeping weeds suppressed, they're going to keep the temperature of the ground about 10 degrees cooler. And that is just an unbelievable help to plants striving to make it through our July and August weather.
One wonderful thing about pine straw mulch is that it breaks down and adds the nutrients that the soil needs.
Right.
The microorganisms need to go ahead and to digest and give your plants the minerals that they need.
Right, and it's a new renewable resource. I think we're looking more and more at that, rather than chopping up cypress trees to make mulch for our beds. We're being encouraged to use the pine straw as a renewable resource. It's funny to think that we have, these high-tech systems that we can use, but I did want to mention a few ideas for a homeowner who possibly has a drought problem. This is a plain old 5-gallon bucket. If you have a newly planted tree that is struggling this summer, up to this point anyway, before we had the rainfall, one quick, easy solution is to take a 5-gallon bucket, drill just 3 or 4 small holes in this bucket, fill it up, and let that water leach slowly into your ground. And the trick being, you want small holes. You don't want the water coming to, pouring out of this bucket. You want it to just drizzle into the ground so you get those roots saturated. So that's one quick, easy solution if if you're a homeowner that is not quite at the watering system stage yet. This has saved. I had a tree a couple years ago that was really struggling, and this little simple technique saved it. Another inexpensive solution is just a manual timer, sort of like an egg timer, that you can put on a hose if you want to be using just a little oscillating sprinkler, and you don't want to, if you're like me, for 20 minutes you're going to remember that you need to go check it. And then 4 hours later you come out and oops, it's way past the point that it should have been turned off. This is, very expensive. There's many types of these available. You hook it between, this part goes onto your faucet, this part goes onto your hose, and then you set it manually, and from 0 minutes to 120. So, and with your sprinkler, after a while you can kind of guess. Mine, I generally set it on an hour. and that gives me an inch of water. So that's an inexpensive, simple technique too.
I'd like to mention a little bit about the water quality, because that's another issue some people have. If we're going through a period where we're not getting much rainfall and you're irrigating a lot and you have poor quality water, maybe you have a little bit high pH or high sodium in that water, those problems tend to accumulate in the water. And you might want to get your water tested, and that's something that you can do through our office, is bringing about a pint of that water. We can send it off and make sure that you're not going to create some problems. Usually if we get rain, it washes a lot of those problems out of the soil. We'd like to thank everyone for joining our show today, and we hope you join us again next month for Get It Growing with the Lafayette Master Gardeners. This has been